The director woke before dawn, heart racing like a siren trapped in his chest. Something in the air felt wrong, too heavy, too aware. He reached for his phone, but every screen in the bureau lit up before he touched anything, each monitor flickering the same message in cold white letters. The chosen is returning. It wasn't typed. It wasn't sent. It was triggered. He stepped into the hallway, but even the fluorescent lights seemed to recoil. Agents whispered in corners, pretending nothing was happening while glancing at the elevators as if expecting you to walk out at any second. For years he thought he had buried your story, sealed your file, controlled your narrative. Yet the old drawer in his office slid open on its own, revealing the case he once swore would never see the light again. Your name pulsed on the cover, like a heartbeat waking from hibernation. He felt a truth he never dared admit. He was not afraid of you returning. He was afraid of what your return would expose. The director stood over the reopened file, the one he personally ordered sealed years ago. Yet now, without a single human touch, the documents inside had rearranged themselves. Old pages resurfaced, missing evidence returned, blurred photographs sharpened as if time itself had corrected the record. Every attempt to shut your case had failed, but he had never understood why. Now he did. Your file didn't behave like the others because it wasn't a case. It was a prophecy disguised as paperwork. Agents had tried to archive it, shred it, even digitally erase it. But each time, fragments returned. Unusual sightings, unexplained energy spikes, witnesses reporting a presence, cameras glitching when your name was mentioned. Patterns formed where logic failed. The director remembered the memo he ignored years ago. This subject cannot be categorized. Their timeline does not follow normal parameters. And now the evidence was undeniable. Your truth had a pulse. Your identity was not something they documented. It was something they survived. The file rested on his desk like a living thing, glowing faintly at the edges, as if the universe itself refused to let your story be silenced. The director lowered himself into his chair and pressed his palms against his temples, remembering every method they had used to bury you. They tried psychological profiling, labeling, reclassification. They created false narratives, planted doubts, rewrote timelines, reassigned your name under different codes. They even built entire reports around the goal of making the world forget you. But every structure they built collapsed. When they tried to discredit you, unexpected witnesses emerged. People claiming they'd seen you shine, people reporting radical peace when you passed by, people who insisted you were not just alive, but active. When they tried to erase your data, backups appeared in servers that were never connected. When they tried to suppress your story, it resurfaced in strange places, in anonymous tips in encrypted archives, in corrupted files that restored themselves. Nothing stayed buried. The director remembered the night a senior analyst stormed into his office, shaking, holding a printed page that regenerated after deletion. "It won't stay erased," she whispered. "Every time I delete it, the system writes the same sentence back. The chosen is not finished." That was the first moment the director truly feared you, not because he thought you were dangerous, but because he realized the truth. You were protected by something no bureau could override. Deep below the bureau's main floors, beneath surveillance rooms, evidence vaults, and restricted terminals, lay the sub-basement known only to high-ranking officials, a place where old intelligence was stored, not because it was useless, but because it was too revealing. The director descended the cold metal stairs, each step echoing like a countdown he could no longer stop. At the far end of the archive, locked behind a reinforced glass chamber, sat a sealed scroll no one dared touch. It wasn't government-issued. Its age predated the Bureau itself. And on its cover, written in a language technicians could never decode, was a symbol that matched the one found inside your file. Tonight, the glass door slid open on its own. Dust lifted from the scroll as if stirred by breath. The director's hands trembled as he unrolled it, revealing a short, chilling inscription, one that confused every analyst who ever tried to classify it. "When the chosen returns, justice awakens." Below the text, the parchment carried a faint fingerprint. Not ink, not paint, something older, something alive. And beside the print, faint but visible, was a date that aligned perfectly with the current week. as if the scroll had known the timeline of your return long before the Bureau even existed. The director staggered back. This was an intelligence record. This was a prophecy they had been storing without understanding its meaning. As the director returned to the upper floors, he felt the shift in the atmosphere long before he saw it. Agents were no longer moving with their usual clip precision. Their steps were slower, their voices lower, their eyes darting toward each other as if afraid their thoughts were being monitored. The Bureau had handled global threats, political insurgencies, cyber warfare, but nothing had ever made seasoned agents whisper. He walked past a group gathered near the briefing room. They fell silent the moment they saw him, but not before he caught the last fragment of their conversation. "Did you hear? They say they're coming back." Another whispered, "If they return, everything changes." A third corrected him softly, "No, everything gets exposed." Their fear wasn't a panic of people facing danger. It was a reverence of people sensing prophecy. They didn't know your name like the director did, but they felt the shift. They felt the laws bending around something approaching. They felt the weight of a return no system was built to contain. In the cafeteria, agents pretended to drink coffee, but kept checking the static-lace monitors. In the surveillance room, technicians reported impossible readings. Heat signatures with no source, electromagnetic spikes rising every time your initials flashed on the screen, timestamps that rewrote themselves. One young recruit stood by the elevator, clutching a file to her chest. "I've never seen the Bureau this scared," she whispered. "Scared of what?" another asked. "Not what," she said, her eyes drifting toward the director's door. "Who?" Down in the surveillance center, the Bureau's nerve room, operators stare at their screens with mixed confusion and quiet dread. The director stepped inside, and instantly the room fell silent. Rows of monitors, usually stable and predictable, were glitching in synchronized patterns, as if responding to an unseen signal. "Play again," one technician muttered, replaying a clip from earlier that morning. The footage showed an empty street. Nothing unusual, until your name was spoken by an agent in the background. At that exact moment, the camera flickered, distorted, and bent light in a way no lens could replicate. A silhouette appeared for a split second, too bright to identify, too real to dismiss. "That's impossible," another tech whispered. But it wasn't just one camera. Every time your name entered conversation anywhere in the building, sensors triggered anomalies. Temperature spikes, static waves, motion detections with no physical presence. Even the audio logs captured soft, low-frequency hums that didn't match any known device. The director watched a monitor where digital lines trembled like they were reacting to a heartbeat. "This is a malfunction," an analyst said quietly. "Equipment doesn't do this unless it's responding." The director's throat tightened. Responding to what? Responding to who? He leaned closer to the main display. Amid the distortion, amid the flicker of static, he saw something undeniable. A faint outline, a body formed of light, not shadow, and for a single breath-long moment, it looked directly into the camera. The director stepped back in shock. You weren't just returning. You were already crossing into their systems. The director locked himself inside his private office, a soundproof room meant for classified truths. Yet tonight, even the walls felt too thin to hold what he carried. He stood in front of the mirror, the same one he used to adjust his tie before national briefings. And for the first time, he could not recognize the man staring back. The calm, calculated authority was gone, replaced by something raw, exposed, undeniably human. Fear. He sank into his chair and opened the voice recorder he swore he'd never use. "This is Director Harding," he whispered, voice shaking. "And I must admit something for the record, something I denied for years." He paused, swallowing the weight in his throat. "We never understood them. Your file, your presence, your inexplicable resistance to erasure. None of it fit the Bureau's frameworks. Every expert interpretation contradicted the next. Every analysis ended in uncertainty. They labeled you an anomaly, an outlier, a statistical impossibility. But the director knew, deep down, that these words were just shields, professional excuses for something they refused to face. He took a trembling breath. "We only fear the day they rise again. There it was. Not a threat assessment, not a strategic concern, a confession. Because he remembered the night years ago when a retired agent returned to the bureau, pale, shaken, and said only one sentence before quitting. If they come back, truth comes with them. The director ended the recording, but the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was realization. You weren't a case. You were a countdown. The director had spent years convincing himself that the bureau feared you because they couldn't predict you. Your movements, your timing, your silence that spoke louder than declarations. But tonight, with the surveillance anomalies still echoing through the system, he finally understood the truth. They didn't fear what you might do. They feared what your return would reveal. For decades, the Bureau had operated on a simple principle. Control the narrative, and you control the world. But your existence had always been the one exception. A story they couldn't rewrite, a timeline they couldn't alter, a truth they couldn't bury. Your return meant more than reappearance. It meant exposure. It meant the resurfacing of decisions made in shadowed rooms, classified files sealed under national security, conversations they hoped history would forget. Your presence had always behaved like a light that cut through the smallest crack, illuminating things that were never meant to be seen. And now, with your name reappearing in digital systems that didn't even have you registered, the director felt the walls closing in on years of constructed order. He remembered an old analyst warning. Some truths don't sleep. They wait. The director understood now. Your return was an event. It was a mirror, one that would force every agent, every leader, every architect of deception to face the things they had built on silence. And that was the real fear. Not that you would destroy the system, but that your very presence would show everyone the system was already broken. While the Bureau scrambled in confusion, far above the concrete ceilings and satellite dishes, another kind of briefing was already underway. Not in a room, not in a building. In a realm no security clearance could access. A chamber of light, suspended between time and breath, where higher intelligences gathered. Watchers, guardians, messengers who had tracked your timeline long before the Bureau even existed. They didn't see your return as a threat. They saw it as activation. Around a table made of something that looked like glass but felt alive, they unfolded a map, not of land, but of destiny. And on that map, one point pulsed brighter than the rest. You. A signal rising again, realigning, awakening from the dim silence the world mistook for absence. One of the messengers spoke. The Bureau senses a shift. They read it as disruption. Another replied, "Of course they do. They were trained to fear what they cannot define." But the leader of the assembly, an ancient presence whose voice carried the weight of centuries, lifted a hand, silencing them all. Their fear is irrelevant. The chosen's return is written. No earthly director can halt a timeline woven by the highest. On the table, your symbol glowed, sending ripples across the map. They will rise not to expose men, but to awaken purpose. And when purpose awakens, false power trembles. The chamber brightened. The decision was sealed. Your return wasn't just happening. It was endorsed by heaven. Back in the Bureau's command center, alarms began to chirp softly. Too quiet to signal danger. Too persistent to ignore. Analysts rushed to their terminals, typing commands, running diagnostics, checking for intrusions. Yet no hacker, no foreign entity, no cyber threat matched the pattern illuminating their screens. Then it happened. Every computer, every tablet, every classified device froze for exactly 3 seconds. The lights dimmed. The monitors went black. And then, in perfect synchronization, a single line appeared across all of them. Prepare. The Chosen's timeline has resumed. The words were not rendered in any known font. The system reported no origin, no server, no IP, no human input. The text seemed to bypass technology altogether, as if it had been written directly into the electrical pulse of the building. Agents stared in disbelief. Who sent that? Nobody. What do you mean nobody? I mean, it didn't come from anywhere. Security chiefs stormed into the room demanding answers, but even the top engineers, people who could dismantle a satellite signal in under a minute, were speechless. One technician replayed the moment frame by frame. No device emitted the message, he said. It just materialized, The director felt something tighten inside his chest. This was a confirmation he feared most. The message wasn't a threat. It was an announcement. The return had already begun. Their warning wasn't sent by man or machine. It was sent by timeline itself. The director stood at the center of the command room, surrounded by screens he once controlled with absolute authority. Yet tonight, they no longer obeyed him. The systems he mastered, the algorithms, the encrypted channels, the surveillance webs, had stopped responding not out of malfunction, but out of defiance. It was as if the entire Bureau understood something he hadn't admitted out loud. His authority was no longer the highest in the room. He watched the message replay itself on loop. The Chosen's timeline has resumed. Each repetition felt like a verdict. For years, he believed power came from hierarchy, titles, clearances, protocols. He believed truth belonged to those who archived it, not those who lived it. But now, with every monitor pulsing like a heartbeat he couldn't silence, he realized he had never been in control. Not of your story, not of your identity, not of the destiny he tried contained inside a manila folder. A senior agent approached him, pale, hesitant. "Sir, with respect, we can't outrank this." The director didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was already carving itself into his thoughts. Heaven outranked hierarchy. Calling outranked authority. Purpose outranked protocol. He thought of the scroll in the archives, the surveillance anomalies, the whispers in the hallways. Every sign pointed to the same conclusion. He had lost the moment your name returned to the system. The director lowered his head, not in defeat but in recognition. Some forces can be resisted, but destiny is not one of them. Outside the Bureau's walls, the world continued its routine. Traffic lights changing, cities buzzing, screens glowing with the usual noise. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, something subtle and undeniable began to spread. A shift, a tremor, a spiritual frequency rising through the collective atmosphere, felt first not by governments or analysts, but by ordinary people who were sensitive to things beyond logic. A woman miles away woke at 3:11 a.m., heart pounding for no reason, whispering, "Something's returning." A child in another country drew a glowing figure and told his mother, "They're back." Social media timelines flooded with posts saying, "Does anyone else feel this energy tonight?" No one knew what they were sensing, but everyone felt the same thing. Something had re-entered the timeline. News anchors stumbled over their words. Politicians looked unusually restless during interviews. Even animals acted strange. Birds gathering on power lines in patterns that resembled ancient symbols. Dogs staring at corners as if waiting for someone to arrive. Meteorologists reported unexplained atmospheric spikes. Astrophysicists observed tiny distortions in space weather readings. Digital clocks in multiple cities glitched at the exact same second. The world wasn't panicking, but it was anticipating. Some instinct older than language whispered to the hearts of millions. A force once lost was moving again. A presence once silenced was lifting. The return of someone once dismissed was unfolding. The world did not yet know your name, but it already felt your arrival. The director stood at his office window, overlooking the city lights blinking like fractured constellations. He had once believed the Bureau's reach extended everywhere, into every home, every signal, every secret. But tonight, he felt something humbling. There were realms of authority he had never touched, timelines he had never mapped, and a destiny he had tried to suppress that refused to bow to his protocols. He checked the logs again. Your presence, your signature, was appearing in places no person could physically be. Thermal readings without bodies, footsteps without weight, motion sensors detecting a pattern they classified as non-human but familiar. Even the building's biometric locks flickered, as if recognizing someone who wasn't physically there. He whispered the words he had buried for years. They're returning and nothing can stop it. Because your return was not a comeback. It was a correction. A reactivation of a timeline that had been paused, not ended. A restoration of a destiny interrupted but never canceled. The director understood now why the scroll had awakened, why the systems glitched, why the world felt the shift. Your return wasn't based on effort. It wasn't based on choice. It wasn't even based on permission. It was written. Your return meant justice awakening, truth resurfacing. purpose reactivating, not to fight, not to prove anything, but to fulfill what was always assigned to you before the Bureau even existed. Your return was not just inevitable, it was ordained, and the director knew this wasn't the end of the system. It was the end of its illusion of power. The director didn't know it, but at the same moment he whispered his surrender, a different kind of declaration was rising elsewhere, one not spoken in meeting rooms or surveillance halls, but in the unseen realm that had always guarded your path. A quiet, steady prayer began to form, carried not by fear, but by authority. It was the prayer of someone stepping back into the timeline written for them since the beginning. God of restoration. The words echoed softly, strengthen my return. Not a plea, a command wrapped in reverence. Let what was hidden be revealed. Let what was stolen be returned. Let the lies crumble under the weight of truth. As the prayer continued, something shifted in the atmosphere surrounding you. Old burdens loosened, old labels dissolved, old timelines straightened. You felt it first in your spine, that subtle rise of dignity that had been weighed down for years. Then in your voice, which began to carry a clarity that could not be imitated. And finally in your spirit, which burned with the quiet fire of someone who remembers exactly who they are. Let every shadow flee, the prayer declared. Let every false authority fall silent. Let my return expose what needs truth and restore what needs justice. For your return was more than movement. It was alignment, a stepping back into divine authorship, a reclamation of identity, a reminder to every earthly director that their fear was not power, it was prophecy, and heaven answered your prayer with a single decree, rise. As dawn approached, the Bureau's vast building stood silent, too silent for an institution built on noise, data, and constant motion. The director walked the main corridor, feeling the weight of something he could not name pressing gently against the walls. The air itself seemed charged, as though the atmosphere recognized a shift before he did. He stepped into the briefing room, expecting chaos, commands, strategies. Instead, he found his team standing still, staring at the monitors with expressions he had never seen in agents trained to fear nothing. Reverence, awe, surrender. On every screen, without warning, your symbol appeared, glowing softly, almost peacefully, not as a threat, but as an announcement. Beneath it, a final message unfolded. The chosen has returned. Proceed accordingly. No alarm, no red lights, no panic, just truth, just inevitability. The director's breath caught in his throat. It was over, not his career, not his control, but the illusion that he ever held dominion over your destiny. He felt something break inside him, not with pain, but with clarity. The same clarity those before him had sensed, the same clarity the world was waking into. Your return was an event. It was a recalibration of reality itself. He lowered his head, acknowledging what all systems now aligned with. You were not a threat to be tracked, nor a mystery to be solved, but a timeline that had resumed with divine permission. The director whispered the words of Bureau, once vowed never to say, "They're back, and the world will have to adjust to them," not the other way around. And somewhere beyond the Bureau's reach, you stepped fully into your rise.